Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are going to be going over Nintendo's recent financial results briefing Q&A. However, there is something else that Nintendo responded to, a question, and their answer is very interesting regarding their future, and perhaps also ending a big debate amongst fans over the last few months regarding, yes, the holiday sales. So Mainichi published this article that has some things said by Nintendo President Shuntaro Furukawa. And here it reads, regarding the possibility of people refraining from purchasing the current console due to the announcement of the successor, he said, I can't say for sure that there won't be any, but the Switch has already been on the market for 8 years. I don't think that the presence or absence of a successor will have much of an impact on customers who buy at this time. So I find this to be extremely interesting. President Shuntaro Furukawa is telling us that he does not think that the knowledge of a Switch successor is going to be making much of an impact on Switch sales. Switch has been out for 8 years. The types of consumers that will be buying the console now are not the types of consumers that are going to be buying Switch 2. It's two different audiences. And actually, taking a look at some of the recent financials, we see here that Switch Lite sales are actually going up a little bit. They're up 7.5% compared to the quarters from the last fiscal year, but OLED sales have dropped significantly by 46.8%. Switch sales, OG sales, they're slightly up. They're kind of basically maintaining pace, but Lite sales are showing an interesting increase here. This seems to be suggesting that there is a small shift in the type of audience interested in Switch. And so when looking at these numbers and considering what President Shuntaro Furukawa has said, I think it very much supports the argument that this idea that Nintendo talking about Switch 2, showing off Switch 2, would be impacting Switch sales in any real significant negative way, because at this point, it is the end. It's been almost 8 years. It will be 8 years, March 2025. If you've been waiting this long to buy a Switch, it's because you haven't been interested for whatever reason, and there isn't anything happening now that's going to make you more interested. And obviously, that's a mass generalization, right? There are going to be exceptions. And I think some people are going to be thinking about these exceptions and blowing them out of proportion here. We're not ignoring the exceptions. Even Furukawa here mentions, I can't say for sure that there won't be any. And so what that means is that, yeah, there probably will be some, but the amount won't be a significant ratio. And this is something I've been arguing for a while. Now, I've been arguing it for a while in hopes that this might mean we see a Switch 2 reveal before the end of the year. And at this point, I'm not really expecting that. We are still getting news. Nintendo has told us some significant details, including backwards compatibility, which, yes, by the way, would likely help sales, at least in terms of software, because there may be those who might be concerned about buying Switch 1 games right now, because they might be worried about it being relevant on Switch 2, and they have confirmed backwards compatibility. And I brought this up before, but let's just take a look at 3DS sales here by every fiscal year, right? So you'll see that in the fiscal year ending in March 2016, before they were really talking about Switch, we just knew about Codename NX, 6.79 million. Then in next year, right, throughout the year and ending March 31st, 2017, that last month Switch came out, 3DS sales were actually up overall. They started marketing the Switch, they did the entire media blitz during this period of time, and 3DS sales were still ultimately higher in this fiscal year compared to the prior one. And then in the next fiscal year, they only dipped a small amount when you consider that there's a whole other new platform out there. So the point is that Switch 1 is still going to sell. They're going to appeal to a different market. I wouldn't be surprised if, similar to the 3DS, how they introduced the new 2D XL line in the same year that the Switch came out, there may be something like that for Switch 1. There may be another revision. There'll likely be price drops. As we discussed a couple days ago, when looking at the numbers, if Nintendo doesn't provide a significant price drop by the last quarter of this fiscal year, they're not going to hit their financial targets. most likely. And this information also means that theoretically, Nintendo could still talk about Switch 2 this month of November or December. Am I expecting that? No. My expectations were that they would reveal the console with an actual trailer of some kind, if not more, by the shareholders meeting on November 5th. We've gotten some news, but not to the extent I was hoping, so at this point, I'm not expecting it until January at the earliest, but the point is, you never really know. Nintendo loves to surprise. And before going forward here, let me just briefly ask that if you've gotten to this point, and you do enjoy my content, to please subscribe and hit that notification bell. Let's now take a look at this Q&A here. Please keep in mind though that this is machine translated by Google, so there could be some little things lost in translation, but reading it through, I think we pretty much have a clear picture of what's being said here. I'm going to be skipping this first question because we've pretty much discussed it already. Yeah, the Switch 2 is backwards compatible with the Switch 1, we've discussed that already. But here it's asked, increasing development costs are becoming a problem in the video game industry. How does Nintendo view this situation? Also, will Nintendo's research and development costs continue to increase in the future? Is there any way to curb the increase in development costs by taking some kind of measures on the hardware side? Then Shigeru Miyamoto responds, Nintendo's research and development costs are increasing every year. In fact, the scale of development is getting bigger, so I think it is inevitable that costs will increase along with that. And before continuing, I'll just say that here, for those that are concerned that Nintendo isn't trying to up the ante, literally what Miyamoto just said tells us that they are. They are raising the bar here. However, I'll now read on, we think that what we create is more important than the size of the development costs. We create products until we are convinced that we have created something that satisfies our customers. What is important from that point on is to find a theme that is worth refining. And this has not changed since the days of the family computer, the Famicom, the NES. Since each person has had their own preferences, it is difficult to say what is worth refining, but there is no doubt that something that has never existed before is worth refining. The more you refine something that has never existed before, the more value you will create. I think it is important to nurture developers who value this uniqueness of Nintendo, and if necessary to spend development costs to finish it until you are satisfied and release the game, and repeat this process. On the other hand, in the entertainment business, for example in toys, it is possible to create attractive products without incurring costs by using interesting ideas. There is no need to incur costs for all products, and even in games, with the right technology, it is possible to create an interesting game with a small number of developers in a short development period. I think it is important not to lose sight of this idea, and that weird transition there was likely because, yes, this is machine translated. But let me also read this part from Shinya Takahashi. We do not spend a lot of money on developing every game. By expanding on the ideas of a small number of developers, we can create unique software that is worth polishing even on a small scale. Overall research and development costs are increasing, but development costs will change significantly from before depending on how we make the game. In addition, development software and development environments have evolved significantly since before the Nintendo Switch, and various methods have been created to reduce costs. Using these methods, Nintendo's unique producers have been able to create software. And so what's being said here is actually really important, because there is a huge issue going on within the industry. Development costs have been rising. So yes, games are more expensive to make, and oftentimes, there will be these huge expensive projects that take years to finish, and then these games come out and are not always successful with the audience and don't sell well, and there's a loss. And so recently, we've been hearing about a lot of different layoffs across the industry. We have not, however, heard this from Nintendo. There was a rumor, but it's been since debunked. Nintendo developers are not getting laid off. Nintendo is thriving in this environment currently. I mean, you look at these games made by Nintendo and their partners, it's impressive. This doesn't even include some really important third-party exclusives like Monster Hunter Rise, for example. These are all Nintendo-published titles that have come out throughout the Switch era, and the library is just incredible. Nintendo's been able to do this for a variety of reasons. They merged their console divisions, they're focusing on one platform right now, and all of their research development is going to one single platform. Recently we talked about how Microsoft has put together a dedicated research and development team. And when we were going over that information, there were some different things that were being pointed out on how they are streamlining the development process, making it a lot easier for them to accomplish a lot more. And so Nintendo is refining their research and development process. They are continuing to focus on one single platform. Going back to the whole concept of backwards compatibility, as we've discussed over the last few days, Nintendo is going to allow the transfer of your Switch Online account. There's going to be more of a smoother transition. This is going to help as well. They are trying to keep a more consistent development environment that's not going to feel too different from Switch. Sure, it's going to be more powerful, there's going to be more things that can be done, and there's going to be a transition there, but Nintendo is doing what they can to ease that transition. And so there are going to be different kinds of games we'll see. We're going to see our Super Mario Odysseys, our Breath of the Wilds, but we're also going to see our Pikmin 4s, our Metroid Dreads, and other smaller projects like Emio the Smiling Man, or Game Builder Garage. I'm actually going to skip question 3 here. It's about the Nintendo Music app. Essentially, it's another touch point. It's another way for Nintendo to expand their IP, reach a larger audience, while also helping to keep Switch Online members subscribed. But what I find more interesting here is this next question. In a media article about the Nintendo Museum, I read that Miyamoto-san gives a lecture to new employees every year. What exactly does that lecture consist of? Also, please tell me about the succession plan in terms of creativity. From the outside, it seems that Miyamoto-san is a genius, which is why he continues to create hits. I think it is difficult to convey the essence of game development. So what kind of methods do you use to achieve this? I would like to know if the essence of Miyamoto-san's creative thinking is being successfully passed down within the company. So I find this question interesting for 2 reasons. One, he calls Miyamoto-san a genius, and I'm curious how Miyamoto's going to respond to that. But 2, he's asking how Nintendo is going to pass down their knowledge from their higher-ups to their younger, newer talent. Let's read on. Miyamoto. You use the word genius in your question, but after my annual lectures for about 100 to 200 new employees and mid-career employees, I often hear people say, I wondered what kind of person Miyamoto was, but I was relieved to find out that he's actually a normal person. I think it would be more fun if I didn't have to work, so if I do work, I think about how to do it as efficiently as possible, and if I'm doing the same job, it's easier to make the next job if it's a hit. So I always think about how to make it more of a hit. In my annual lectures, I also talk about these kinds of creative worries. So just personally speaking, when I hear about Miyamoto and how he thinks of himself as a normal person and how he will like to do things that are more fun, and this impacts how he handles his career, it's actually somewhat similar to me personally. The reason I'm a content creator is because I want to do things that are fun. It's fun talking about video games, which is why I do it. Of course, there's a lot more to what Miyamoto is saying here. The lecture is divided into 3 parts. The first part will talk about the history of Nintendo, which started with Hanafuda cards, passed through toys, and is now an entertainment company. In the second part, we will talk about what Nintendo has valued in game development and what its strengths are. For example, we will explain the evolution of interfaces since the days of arcade games, tracing the evolution of controllers. In the third part, we will talk about what game design is. Many new developers who play lots of games want to create a more luxurious version of the games they played before. But instead, game design is about assembling what would be interesting to make into a video game from various things around you. At the same time, we will explain that game design is about designing, such as thinking about what hardware and development environment you will use to create the game, considering the processing power, and whether you can really create what you want to create, and then going through trial and error to make it happen. Upon hearing this, many people are amused, saying that this is not the kind of game design I had in mind, or that they emphasize with the way of thinking behind the creation of things. The lectures are only about 2 hours long each year, So we think that it would be useful for employees to visit the Nintendo Museum to look at the history of past challenges so that they can later recall the contents of those lectures. And then here Takahashi jumps in. At Nintendo, the producers who develop various video games create unique games while making use of their own characteristics. I think that each producer listens to various stories from Miyamoto and works on games together, thinking about how to apply his ideas to their own ideas of expertise as they work on development. Therefore, based on Miyamoto's way of thinking, each producer creates a unique game while chewing over the words and ideas he hears in his mind. And these are passed on the same way to the people who develop games together with their producers. So, essentially my takeaway from this is that Nintendo has a certain culture, and they share this culture with all of their developers. They have these museums, they have these meetings, these events where Miyamoto speaks to all of them. And he conveys his thought process, how he and Nintendo look at game development. But then also, as Takahashi goes into, as they are developing games, there's an exchange of ideas throughout the process. And so this exchange of ideas is building up newer developers. As developers work with each other, they're all learning from each other throughout the process of development. And so in this way, as developers continue to work with Nintendo, they will develop and they will be able to take on the mantle as Miyamoto moves on. And I do think it should be noted that at this point, Miyamoto is not really that heavily involved in game development as he once was. He does have a say in things. He had a say in Pikmin 4, for example. But he's also taking on other roles, like having these speeches to a whole bunch of developers, or working closely on the different Nintendo movies, like the Mario movie and the upcoming Zelda movie. And I think this is interesting to talk about because perhaps some people are concerned about the future of Nintendo. But looking at everything, it seems like Nintendo is very well aware of how to handle things here. They are aware of what's going on with the industry, they are aware of the challenges of the increasing cost of development, and so they've taken the steps accordingly. Nintendo is aware of passing on the torch to younger developers, and so they've been taking the appropriate steps. And Nintendo also seems to be aware of who's buying Switches right now and who will be buying Switch 2s in the future. They know what's going on, and I feel pretty good about where they're headed. And for those who are curious about the final question and answer, I'll be putting it in the pinned comment in the interest of time. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart, thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care.